All right, hi freshmen. I believe it's Thursday morning. I am still in Iowa, still wearing the same clothes. Today we're going to be looking at the story of Isaac and Rebekah from Genesis 24. Hopefully you got your Bibles. You can also get out the sheet that we used yesterday about the rest of Abraham. Why don't we're going to have you read through a number of passages. The passages are going to be listed up on the screen here at the beginning. Mrs. Bitework will pick who's going to read them. Just make a note of which passages you're going to have so that way you can come back to those later. But to wrap up Abraham, we got to make sure that Isaac gets married so that way future generations are established through the line of Abraham. Why don't you pause in just a sec and read the first part of this, verses 1 through, actually I want you to do 1 through 11. And I'd like you to think about probably two things. One, what's the servant being asked to do? And two, why is the servant so concerned about if this doesn't work? What's going on with that? If someone's not willing to come back with him, what's the problem with that? So pause and read through the verse and keep those questions in mind. All right, so a few things as we introduce Isaac and Rebekah. One, where does Abraham want Isaac's wife to be from? It's the first question on our sheet. And it seems like he wants Isaac's wife to be from the land of his relatives, not from the land of Canaan where he's settled. We begin a theme here, which will come up a few other times throughout our semester, where Abraham, and through the work of God, is trying to prevent or keep his descendants from intermarrying with the people around them. And it might not seem like that would be so bad. It's not so much about different ethnicities or something like that. It's really more about these other people around them are worshiping other gods. And Abraham and then later Isaac, they don't want their children to be influenced by people who might not be following God. And so it's an important thing for them to find something from their relatives. Couple things, right? It says, servant asks Abraham, what if I go and try to find her and she's not willing to come back? And Abraham says, don't bring Isaac there, right? And that's probably important because one of the big promises that God gave to Abraham was land. And if the servant were to take Isaac out of that land, then there's the possibility that that promise would be negated. They would not receive the promised land that God had offered to them. One other thing that you can pause it and talk more about if you really want to, but Abraham asks the servant to reach up under his thigh and swear an oath. There's no really easy way around that. I'll just say it like this. Abraham's essentially asking the servant to swear on his circumcision. And that might seem weird. It does seem a little weird to us probably. But essentially, Abraham's saying to the servant, like, this is God's covenant, and this is serious. And if you're not able to fulfill your duty, then all of God's promises and covenant could be in jeopardy. And so it's a little bit odd how they do that, and we might not be comfortable with it. But in a cultural kind of way, Abraham's saying to the servant, the whole covenant is going to be reliant on your success in this journey. It says in verse 12, the servant, he sets out with 10 of his master's camels. We already know that part. He gets down and he sits down outside of a well, and the women are going to come out to draw water. Within the culture, women get the water. That's just part of their job. It's part of their responsibilities. And so it's later in the day. Then the servant does this prayer, and I'll read a little bit of this for us here in verse 12. The servant says, God, make me successful today. Show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I'm standing beside the spring, and the daughter of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. May it be, that when I say to a young woman, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too, let her be the one that you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. So here's what the servant asks, right? He sits down next to a well, and actually this becomes a theme that'll come up a few times as well. Where do people meet other people? It seems to be the well outside of town. Happens a lot. But he's sitting beside this well. He's got 10 camels. We find out later that he's got some servants with him. And so he prays. He asks God, give me a woman who, when I ask for some water, is going to do that. And that would probably be the expected part, right? You think about the hospitality in that culture. If he asks for a little bit of water from her, of course she's going to be like, yeah, sure, here, have a little bit of the water that I've gathered. You can have a drink, that's fine. But the servant actually wants her to do something else. Whoa, wardrobe change. This must be the important part if we're going to go hat and glasses for this, or I had a late night technical glitch. But here's where we were just a second ago, or a few hours ago for me. The servant, right, it would have been very typical for him just to ask for a little glass of water, a little refreshment, and that would have been perfectly acceptable for a woman to bring to him. But instead, he says to God, God, give me someone who's going to get me water and my camels, all 10 of them. And we also find out a little bit later that he's actually got servants with him as well. So he's looking for someone who's going to do more than just get what's expected in the culture, but actually 10 camels, take care of them. I don't know if you know a whole lot about camels. Even if you don't, there's probably like one common thing that we all know about camels. They drink a lot of water. They can store a lot of water. They take in a lot of water. It's been said that in one sitting, one camel can drink up to 30 gallons of water. One camel, 30 gallons of water. And he's got 10. That's, if you want to quick do the math in your head, that's like 300 gallons of water. So he's looking for a woman who's not just going to bring him the little cup of water that might be expected, but to get 300 gallons for the camels and the men. And not only that, we don't know exactly what the well would have looked like where Rebekah was. Here's an example of one. It's steep. There's a lot of stairs. It's way down at the bottom. Just imagine the amount of effort this is going to take for her. Let's say she has a jar that she's carrying the water in, and maybe that jar is 5 gallons or so. How many times is it going to take her to go fill up that jar and bring it back and do it over and over again? Like 60 times. I mean, the thing that the servant is praying for is for a woman who's going to do something really extraordinary. Not just what's expected, but something that's going to take hours of her time even, and great effort. All she's going to be doing is showing up, trying to do her normal work for the day and for the evening. And he's looking for something really unique. So he's praying this prayer. And in verse 15, it actually says that before he had finished praying. Now, you've probably prayed for things at times, and you've asked God for things, and we often say, God works on his own timing. Sometimes it takes a while to see an answered prayer. But this guy, it's almost like he's praying for, God, give me the woman who's going to give water to my camels. And he's starting to peek out of his eye because someone's coming. And as he says, amen, he looks up and he sees this woman coming out, Rebekah. It says that Rebekah comes out with her jar on her shoulder. She's the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, who's the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. Some sort of cousin to Isaac, probably, if you want to figure that one out on your own time. It says that Rebekah, in verse 16, was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever slept with her. This is that thing we've mentioned a couple times, where it sort of does like a double meaning, right, or a double emphasis on what's going on, where it says that she's a virgin and she's never slept with a man. In other words, she's a virgin, and she's a virgin, like she's extra pure, or extra virgin-y, or something like that, right? It's highlighting her purity, and she's beautiful. She went down to the spring, she filled her jar, and she came up again. The servant goes over to meet her and says, please, give me a little water from the jar. He's starting this potential process to see if God's going to answer his prayer. She says, drink, and she lowers the jar and gives him a drink. And then she does this in verse 19. After she had given him a drink, she said, I'll draw water for your camels too, until they've had enough to drink. And the servant must have been like, are you kidding me? Already? She quickly emptied her jar into the trough. She ran back to the well to get more water and drew enough for all the camels. Without saying a word, the man watched closely to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. It actually sounds like, he's watching really closely to see if she's the one. Because, I'm going to sit back because if she stops at jar 298, well, yeah, that's just not enough. You fell short by 2 gallons. So he's just watching her work. It says when the camels had finished drinking, the man took out a gold nose ring weighing Rebekah and 2 gold bracelets. And it actually says later on that the nose ring is in. So it's like, nose ring, pops it in, puts the bracelet on her arm, and suddenly Rebekah's like, oh, I think I just got engaged. He says to her, whose daughter are you? Tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? And she said, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah. We have plenty of straw and fodder. Come on over to spend the night. The man bowed down and he worshiped God, right? He paused. He praised God for this remarkable answer to prayer. And he said, praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives. Rebekah ran and told her mother's household about all these things. Said Rebekah had a brother named Laban. We'll hear about him later. He hurried out. He had seen the nose ring in. He had seen the bracelets and heard what Rebekah had said about what happened. He went out to the man. He found him standing there by the camels. And he said, come to our house. Why are you standing here? We'll prepare a place for you. The man goes home. Everything's unloaded from the camels. Food is set before him. And he says, I'm not going to eat until I tell you my story. Laban says, tell us. And he repeats the story of what Abraham had told him to do. He mentions that Abraham is wealthy. He's blessed. He has money and gold and silver and sheep and cattle and servants working for him, kind of highlighting the fact that if your daughter is going to leave and go marry this guy Isaac, we can take care of her. We have the means to look out for your daughter. The servant says, the master made me swear an oath. Not going to mention how he made me swear, but the master made me commit to an oath and said, you must not get a wife from the Canaanites. And then he asked, what if she doesn't come back? And Abraham said, don't take her back here. You'll be released don't take Isaac back there. You're released from the oath. He talks about coming to the well and praying and being there. And before he'd even finished praying, here comes Rebekah. And he gets to the point where he says, I put the nose ring in her, I put the bracelets on her arms, I bow down and worship the Lord. And then in verse 49, kind of jumping ahead, he says, now if you'll show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me. If not, tell me, so I can know which way to go. In other words, let me know if this worked, right? And if this didn't work, let me go on my way. And Laban and Bethuel actually say, this is from the Lord. We can't say anything. In fact, here's Rebekah. Take her and go. It's like they're almost immediately recognizing that this is something that she needs to do and God has brought to her. And she can go right away. So let's look at the questions on the sheet again. And if you need to pause it to get this a little bit, have a little bit longer up on the screen, that's fine. What does the servant ask God to do in Nahor? What does he ask of this woman? Provide a woman that's going to bring him, his men, his 10 camels, all water. Again, around 300 gallons of water in one sitting. Rebekah's just coming out and minding her own business, just doing what she does every single day. And he's looking for someone who's just going to drop everything and spend time serving him. He's looking for someone who's going to go way beyond what was expected of her and spend hours taking care of him. And the next question, again, pause if you need it. What does Rebekah do when she meets the servant? She does it. She gets him, the camels, all the servants. She gets them water while, the servant watches. Why don't we pause here as well? You can go back through those last couple things if you need them. And read together the people that have been assigned. Genesis 24, verse 52 through 67. And I'll come back right after that once you've read that together. It's pretty remarkable that they get up the next morning and the servant's ready to go back. Think about evening to morning, 12 hours, 15 hours tops for this probably 15-year-old girl to leave her family completely and go off and marry someone that she's never met. The servant says, "Let me go." And actually, her brother and mom say, "What about 10 days?" Maybe they've rethought that a little bit over the night. They like a little bit more time with her. The servant says, "Don't hold me back. God's given us success. Let's go finish this off as He intends." And then they go to Rebekah, someone who, I don't know what you would do in that situation if you were asked to make this really big life decision in a moment. And they say to her, "Would you go?" And she says, "Yeah, I will." And they send her away with the nurse and the servant and the men to go meet Isaac. And then I actually love the ending part, which you just read. I kind of envision, like if Hollywood was making the ending to this story, you've got Isaac one evening. He's going out to the fields. Probably he's done that before. He's going out to meditate, to pray. And maybe he's wondering, how's the servant doing? I wonder if he's being successful. I wonder if he's met a girl yet. I wonder when God's going to answer this prayer. And then he sees a camel caravan up on the horizon as the sun's setting and the silhouettes of those figures appear. And Rebekah looks out and sees a guy in the field in the distance in just the right colors. And she asks the servant, "Who's that?" And the servant says, "That's your husband." And of course the music rises and it's a great happy ending. They run to each other and kiss or something like that. But it says that when Isaac finds out, he marries Rebekah. And that brings some comfort to Isaac after his mother Sarah has passed away. It's an interesting story. It's a fascinating story. This link in the line of Abraham to continue the line of Abraham. And I think when I think about what's some application or what's something that we can take away from this story, I think the character of Rebekah is just remarkable. And she does some things wrong later on. She's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination in the Bible. But there's something to her. There's something really amazing about her that sticks out even to this servant. And the last question on your sheet says something like, what can we learn about serving from Rebekah? Because I think she actually sets a really amazing example for what it means to serve others. And maybe you can talk about this a little bit more in class together. What does her example show us? But here's a couple things that I think about when I'm thinking about Rebekah's serving. One, she went way above and beyond what was expected of her. It would have been enough just to simply give a little bit of water and go on her way, and that would have been very, very acceptable. But instead, she stopped everything. She set aside everything else that she had to do, and she just helped this man that she never met before, without even knowing what might come of it, just with no expectation of that, just out of the goodness of her heart. I think that's a really strong, powerful example of what it means to give to others. The other thing that really strikes me with her, the servant, right? The servant, during the whole time that Rebekah was going and hauling water, he just kind of sat back and watched. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've been serving someone and they're kind of hanging around and they're not really pitching in. And they might even be watching you do the work that's benefiting them. And sometimes it's really easy to complain in that moment or be resentful. And I think if I was Rebekah and I'm watching this servant just stand there while I'm hauling his water for hours, I might look at him at some point and say, "Hey, buddy, you want to help?" But instead, she doesn't do that. She never seems to resent serving him or complain at all. And I think that's another thing that shows her character. She just went about it. And she never stopped. She never resisted. She never looked at him and accused him of anything. She just did it without complaining and just went for it. And of course, probably the biggest thing is that serving like this will get you married. She got engaged through it. That's a joke. Don't write that down. That's not true. Maybe it's true. I don't know. That's why we do Service Week. You can talk with Mrs. Bytrook more about that, but not really. So, again, thinking about the story of Isaac and Rebekah and the significance of this woman and this arrangement that comes together, that God brings together in their lives. And so in some ways that wraps up our unit on Abraham. And as we start to look ahead to the next unit, it'll be more focused on Jacob and Joseph and what happens in Egypt through their family lines. So Hope you have a good rest of your day and a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week.